Bobby, if I may, because you said I could, you had once described yourself as pro-vaccine to me. Now, the context of what I'm about to ask is that there's multiple studies establishing the safety of measles and hepatitis B vaccine, and specifically that they are not a cause of autism. In this position, and you have previously said yes, but if you are approved to this decision, to this position, will you say unequivocally, will you reassure mothers unequivocally and without qualification that the measles and hepatitis B vaccines do not cause autism?
Senator, I am not going into the agency with any.
Well, that's kind of a yes or no question, because so if you're, because the data is there, and that's kind of a yes or no. And I don't mean to cut you off, but that really is a yes or no.
If the data is there, I will absolutely do that.
Now there is the data. Just because I used to do hepatitis B, as I've said, I know the data is there.
Well, then I will be the first person. If you show me data, I will be the first person to assure the American people that they need to take those vaccines.
Now, what concerns me is that you've cast doubt on some of these vaccines recently. I mean, like the last few years, but the data, and I can quote some of it, the data has been there for a long time. I've been out of the game. I've been in Congress for 16 years, and this data was in large measure generated before I came to Congress. So my concern is that if you were making those claims and being so influential, I mean, your bully pulpit is incredible. With that responsibility, that you never acquainted yourself with anything that might contradict that what you were previously saying. So let me ask once more. If the data is brought to you, and these studies that have been out there for quite some time and have been peer-reviewed, and it shows that these two vaccines are not associated with autism, will you ask, no, I need even more? Or will you say, no, I see this, it's stood the test of time, and I unequivocally and without qualification say that this does not cause autism?
Not only will I do that, but I will apologize for any statements that misled people otherwise.
Thank you. Next.
And I just want to pledge to you that I will never stick on a point if somebody shows me data that says I'm wrong. I know that's an interpretation people have, but it's absolutely wrong. I am science-driven and evidence-driven.
I think the concern is how persuadable people are.
And I just want to point out, I don't understand why my colleagues all of a sudden say we can't question science. I mean, it absolutely blows my mind that all of a sudden it's such shame that Bobby's sitting up here and he's questioning science, because I guarantee you, if he was sitting here and he was going to be the secretary of HHS underneath the former President Biden, which I enjoy saying former president, I would bet you that you guys would have his back 100% and enjoy the fact that he's questioning science and would probably support his positions 100%. But because he's now on the Republican side, you guys have went way off the rail. And how dare he question science? My God, if we didn't question science, where would we be today? We've always questioned science. Science is always evolving and always changing. Have a glass of wine a day, it's healthy for you. Don't have a glass of wine a day. Have a piece of chocolate a day, it's healthy for you. Dark chocolate is healthy for you. Take an aspirin a day, as Senator Rand Paul pulled out. I mean, where would we be today if we didn't ever question science? But I will say there's an issue that I have as a father of 6, that when my kids come out from getting their vaccines, they look like a freaking pincushion. I mean, 72 vaccinations? I think there's a reason we should be questioning this. When you start looking at the rise of autism, why wouldn't we be looking at everything? Who wouldn't want to look at everything? Give me anybody in this room that doesn't know somebody that you're personally connected to that one of their children doesn't suffer from some severity of autism. Give me one. And you guys are all saying that Bobby can't question it? I don't get it, guys. I don't understand your point, other than the fact you just oppose him because he supports a president that you guys don't like now. I applaud him for going into the situation and saying, let's question something. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing, expecting different results.
Relevant to what the point you just made, in 1963, my uncle awarded John F. Kennedy the highest civilian honor to Francis Kelsey. Francis Kelsey was a young scientist at NIH who came in and objected to the panel having approved thalidomide for American children. All the scientists that day, they were doing it in Europe, all the scientists that day and the scientific panels that work for the agency approved, green-lighted thalidomide. She stood up and screamed and fought and risked her job and risked her reputation, and she blocked it in our country. 3 years later, everybody recognized that she was a hero and a savior of our children, because we were not getting the kind of terrible, diabolical deformities as they were experiencing in Europe. My uncle gave her the highest civilian honor because she questioned science and was courageous enough to stand up and say, I don't care what happens to me, this cannot happen.
Look, I want to just take a moment because, like a few of us on this dais, I sit on finance as well as help. And one of the things that was most disturbing to me about yesterday's hearing was the suggestion from some of my friends on the other side of the dais that our intense questioning and concerns about Mr. Kennedy were driven by partisanship. I have voted for 5 of President Trump's nominees to date in the last couple of weeks. One of them, the new Secretary of Transportation, was on the scene last night at DCA. Like all of us, I take really seriously our obligation for advice and consent. And I am concerned, as Senator Mullen expressed his concern, about the need for science to help us move forward on critical issues. Now, some of you are new to this committee and new to the Senate, so you may not know that I am the proud mother of a 36-year-old young man with severe cerebral palsy. And a day does not go by when I don't think about what did I do when I was pregnant with him that might have caused the hydrocephalus that has so impacted his life. So please do not suggest that anybody in this body of either political party doesn't want to know what the cause of autism is. Do you know how many friends I have with children who have autism? The problem with this witness's response on the autism cause and the relationship to vaccines is because he's relitigating and churning settled science so we can't go forward and find out what the cause of autism is and treat these kids and help these families. Mr. Kennedy, that first autism study rocked my world. And like every mother, I worried about whether, in fact, the vaccine had done something to my son. And you know what? It was a tiny study of about 12 kids. And over time, the scientific community studied and studied and studied and found that it was wrong. And the journal retracted the study because sometimes science is wrong. We make progress. We build on the work and we become more successful. And when you continue to sow doubt about settled science, it makes it impossible for us to move forward. So that's what the problem is here. It's the relitigating and rehashing and continuing to sow doubt so we can't move forward, and it freezes us in place.
Scientists with the Yale School of Public Health and University of Maryland have estimated that the COVID vaccine saved 3 million lives and prevented 18 million hospitalizations. President Trump, someone who I do not often agree with, has said that the COVID vaccine was, quote, one of the greatest miracles of the ages. That's Donald Trump. But Bobby, you had a very different perspective. At a time when thousands of Americans were dying from COVID every week in May of 2021, you petitioned the Food and Drug Administration to revoke the emergency use of COVID vaccines. So my question to you is, were the scientists who told us that the COVID vaccine was imperative and President Trump who told us that it was this great thing, were they right or were you right when you told people that they should not take COVID shots?
Senator, I filed that lawsuit after CDC recommended the vaccine for 6-year-old children without any evidence that it would benefit them and without testing on 6-year-old children. And that was my reason for filing that lawsuit.
Was the COVID vaccine, successful in saving millions of lives?
I don't know. We don't have a good surveillance system, unfortunately.
We don't know?
I don't think anybody can say that. If you show me science that says that.
You know, Bobby, you say, if I show you, you're applying for the job. I mean, clearly, you should know this. And that is, the scientific community has established that COVID vaccines save millions of lives, and you're casting doubt. That is really problematic.